BBC News, I'm John Shea. The Israeli army says it's carrying out an operation against Hamas in part of Gaza's largest hospital. The military described its actions at Al-Shifa as precise and targeted and demanded the surrender of people it called terrorists. Earlier, a spokesman for the Gaza Health Authority appealed to the leaders of Egypt, Qatar and the UN to intervene to save the lives of patients and staff. Mark Regev, an advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister, said Israel had offered to alleviate the humanitarian situation at Al-Shifa.
We've offered fuel for the hospital, for the incubators for the babies. That was refused by Hamas under Hamas pressure. And we've also offered to help evacuate the hospital, as was done with the other hospital, the Rantisi Hospital. That was also refused. Quite frankly, even the babies, we could have had ambulances or something like that take them out. But Hamas is interested in the humanitarian catastrophe.
The Chinese leader Xi Jinping has arrived in San Francisco ahead of talks later on Wednesday with President Biden. Both sides appear to want to stabilise their poor relationship, given China's faltering economy, but expectations of any major breakthrough are low. Our North America editor Sarah Smith reports.
Mr. Biden's modest hope is to restore communications between Chinese and American officials, particularly military personnel, so that they can, as he says, pick up the phone and talk to one another if there is a crisis, so that misunderstandings don't accidentally spiral into conflict. On the agenda will be everything from the wars in Gaza and Ukraine — America wants China to keep out of both — as well as disputes over Taiwan, trade and the US ban on exporting certain technology to China. Consensus is very unlikely. Agreeing to disagree peacefully is the goal.
The US House of Representatives has passed a temporary spending bill to avert a government shutdown. Many Democrats supported the measure, which was put forward by the new Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. The measure will now go to the Senate, where it's expected to pass before a deadline on Friday. The former British Home Secretary Suella Braverman, who was sacked on Monday, has said the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, never had any intention of keeping the promises he made when he became leader. In a scathing letter to Mr Sunak, she accused him of putting off tough decisions to minimise political risk to himself. Rob Watson reports.
This has to be one of the most outspoken and vicious attacks ever in British politics from an outgoing minister. In her letter, Suella Braverman attacks Rishi Sunak as a man, as a leader and as a politician. She accuses him of betraying promises to her and the country to cut immigration, and writes he has shown weakness and uncertainty in the face of growing extremism and anti-Semitism. Downing Street has reacted frostily, saying actions count more than words.
World News from the BBC. Zimbabwe's main opposition party has accused the ruling ZANU-PF of attempting to destroy it after another 18 of its members of parliament lost their seats. The Citizens' Coalition for Change said the man who declared that they had been ineligible to stand in a recent general election wasn't a member of the party. A CCC spokesman told the BBC the move was a plot aimed at helping ZANU-PF get a two-thirds majority in parliament. Earlier this week, the opposition said one of its activists was abducted and killed. The army in Mali has captured the northern town of Kidal, which has long been a stronghold for Tuareg-dominated separatist groups. The country's military leader, Colonel Assimi Goïta, said the army had inflicted heavy losses on the rebels. He said the mission wasn't complete and vowed to secure the whole country. The Tuareg rebels said they had withdrawn from Kidal but would keep fighting. Guyana has asked the International Court of Justice in The Hague to issue an emergency order suspending a referendum that Venezuela plans to hold next month on the disputed region of Essequibo. For over a century, Venezuela has claimed rights to the region, which accounts for two-thirds of its neighbour's territory and has large oil reserves. Guyana argues that the referendum poses an existential threat to the country. The English football manager Emma Hayes has been named as the new boss of the US women's team. She won 13 major trophies during more than a decade in charge at Chelsea. Joe Curry reports.
The US has always been the dominant force in women's football, 4-time world and Olympic champions. But after a disappointing World Cup in the summer, they've slipped down the rankings. Hayes, who describes her new role as a dream come true, will take charge in May at the end of the current domestic season, and in doing so, will become the highest paid women's football coach in the world.
Joe Curry reporting. And that's the latest BBC World News.